Hi there, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, episode 139. I'm in my new house and I apologize if there's a slight echo at the moment. I haven't actually fitted the sound equipment yet, but I'm just going to keep my voice relatively low and hopefully that will be okay. I'll have it all sorted by the next podcast if there is an issue. So today's comments and emails, there are relatively few of them actually. We've still got, of course, a bunch, but not quite as many as usual. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk a little bit about a subject that I've been meaning to get around to for some time now. I read a book over and over again. So it was actually not a book, it's like a shortened version of a book that I got from one of my favorite apps for shadowing, which is 得到, which is a rather advanced app. It's a native app for native speakers. So maybe if you've passed the intermediate course at Mandarin Blueprint, you might be able to listen to a few things. But I featured the app in a video I did about shadowing recently, which you can check out on our YouTube channel. So the topic I want to talk about is 面子, which means face, and it's a subject that it's a thing that exists in the Western world too. The idea of face, in fact, to lose face, this was taken from China, I believe, this phrase that we have. And I read this 25-minute version of a book called 面子与人情. 语 means and in certain contexts. So it basically means 面子 means face, and 人情 is favors. And we'll talk about how they're connected very shortly. So first of all, 面子, what is it? Well, 面子 is actually society's confirmation of one's morals, abilities, and achievements. That's the definition that this book gives. So I think this is actually a really good definition. I think it's very accurate to what it is. It's 面子 is only seen in the eyes of others. It's like the most valuable currency that exists in China. I guess in a lot of places in the world, right? But especially in China, it's far more valuable than money. It's up there with kind of like trust, community. These are other currencies that exist that are much harder to earn than money in a lot of cases, and are much more valuable. So the more 面子 you have, the more face you have in Chinese society, the more ability you have to wield resources, whether that's people, like using people to do things, or and money is a factor. Being very rich does give you 面子, but you can't buy 面子 in the same in like, I have more money, therefore I'm just going to have 面子, because 面子 is not just about stuff. It's about your behavior in a lot of ways, things that you do. And the achievements that you have, the things that you've achieved. So I'll talk more about the difference between Western and Chinese face and where Chinese face comes from, really, a little bit later on. But first, let's talk about the two kinds of 面子, which the guy in the book talks about. The first one is moral 面子, which is 道德脸面. 脸面 is just another way of saying face. So this moral face, the face that you get from how you act in society, how moral you are in society, and then the societal face. This is all my translations, by the way. Of course, the book was purely in Chinese, and I just took out the interesting points and translated it into English. So 社会脸面, societal face. Let's talk about these two just briefly. So moral face is basically how you behave morally, of course, in terms of how Chinese people view morals and ethics. And just the first point that the author makes about this, which is so true, if you live in China, you see this all the time, is that the elderly and the children in the society are given far more leeway. So they don't lose so much face for doing, quote unquote, immoral things. Children, for example, not sharing and just like taking a bunch of candy that they see on the floor and not sharing it with their friends and taking as much as they can. We might just say, 太没面子, 没面子, like 不要脸 is another phrase that we'll get into later. And it's kind of jokey, but when it comes to, you know, people that are not elderly or people that are not children, you could be very, you know, it's much more serious to commit certain immoral deeds, especially in public. This idea of moral face, it doesn't really fluctuate that much as long as you don't do anything crazy, like anything bad. It doesn't go up. It's kind of hard to increase your moral face. It's kind of hard, but it's fairly easy to decrease it, I suppose. But just as long as you behave yourself, it stays where it is. So that's kind of why losing moral face, you know, when you do something bad morally and in the eyes of others, that's much worse, because it's kind of hard to come back from it. Whereas societal face is different. Look at societal face. Societal face, 社会脸面, it depends on your status in society. And of course, this can increase and decrease, and this is highly relative as well. So like a boss at work, the boss of an office, he's got very high status, hasn't he? So he's got a lot of face in his workplace where he is the boss. But when he's with his parents-in-law, his status is low then. Not that he's, you know, seen as low or like, you know, but he just is. That's his rung. He's in that rung, in that sort of pocket of society when he's having dinner with his in-laws. So he has to be more careful. You know, he can get away with less. Let's put it that way. And his status is lowered. So that means it's 100% relative. Another thing with societal face, 社会脸面, is that it is often faked. It can be faked, just like you can, well, basically through lying. So one common example is people who set up these kind of fake companies that are essentially made to launder money. So they don't actually provide any service or value, really. They're just there so that you can either, I believe people do it to sort of get tax breaks and be able to write off expenses and stuff like this. And it's obviously illegal, but it's unfortunately rather common here. So one thing that people can do, you know, someone can say he can set up this fake business and he can make it look amazing, but it's not real. He is the boss technically, and he's got this sort of made up, you know, he's a renovated, lovely office, but it's not real, right? So, and he can use that face, that 面子 to get resources, to persuade people to do things for him or to gain more investment or whatever it is. So it can be faked in that way. And another thing about societal face, which makes it the most interesting, obviously, another thing about societal face that makes it the most interesting is that it's different from moral face in that it fluctuates heavily, and it can be borrowed and lent to people. So for just an example of that is given in the book, you know, say your uncle does something really bad, you can actually stand in for your uncle and talk to the person, the victim of whatever's going on, and you can say, you know, 看我的面子上, you know, 你原谅他吧. Like, so, for the sake of my face, you know, forgive my uncle. So you can sort of give your uncle some of your face, some of your status, and to get him off. Say, you know, he's in a sticky situation. Now, it can be very transactional as well. It is very transactional, and it's actually the most important, and that makes it the most interesting and important part of 面子, this concept. So those are the two types of face, and obviously we're going to spend most time talking about societal face, the most interesting and complex one. But one of the key things to remember about face when you live in China or you're hanging out with Chinese people is just whenever you can, please just avoid causing other people to lose face, especially morally. Just basically don't let people be embarrassed. Do not call people out, even if they're doing something silly, because it's sort of like I said, it's the most important currency in Chinese society, and if you lose face, in any situation, really, it's always really bad, and it's much worse than we can often in the West, we can just I got a little bit embarrassed, then I can just sort of brush it off and try again next time. But it's taken a lot more seriously in China. So whenever possible, try to avoid causing people to lose face. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'll give some examples. And there's this other word for face as well called lian. Now, if you're on our course or if you've been learning Chinese, you know that lian is the real word for face. So mianzi is this abstract term for the face that we put on in public, which essentially the mask we wear, and that we're always trying to protect, and the status that we have in society. So it's a very abstract term. Lian, of course, you would know it to be the actual character or word for face. And it is also used as a part of mianzi. Lian is often concerned more related to moral face more than societal. And as soon as I saw this and heard this in the book, 人情与面子, I saw that and I immediately thought of a video that I'd seen recently. It just went viral in China. It was a railway ticket salesman, and this woman keeps pushing in line. And this happens a lot in China. It can happen. People just push in line and then, oh, did I get away with it? Okay, I did. Cool. I guess it happens in the West too, but it seems to be a bit more common here. In certain areas. And so she was pushing in, and he was like, why are you pushing in? Go to the back of the line. And then she sort of like went off, and then she came back again. She kept trying to do it. I think the third time or something like that, he said something. And he said to her, 要有点脸. He pointed to his cheek and he said, you should have a little bit of 脸. You need to have a little bit of face. So what he's saying is you've just have some face, like you need to act like you should in society, otherwise you're losing your moral face, which is often referred to as lian. It can be both though, but I'm just saying when you see lian, it's usually the moral aspect of mianzi. So a very common phrase is 没有面子. 我没有面子, which means 我丢面子. 丢 means to lose, or 没有 means don't have, so 我没有面子. So if you say 我没有面子, that means that how others see your abilities or achievements, your status, has been damaged in some way. And 没有脸 is how others see your moral standing. That has been damaged. So again, all in the eyes of others. But these two are different, So a very common phrase is, or rather common phrase is 为了要面子可以不要脸. Okay, so that just shows the delineation between 面子 and 脸. How that 面子 is more about the societal face and like the abilities, status, doing favors for people, and 脸 is more about the moral side. So 为了要面子, to 要面子, in order to get face, societal face, you can 不要脸, you can do immoral things. Like I said, people can fake 面子, all sorts of things. So that is, basically if you wanted to raise your status in society, a lot of people can do not so great things. I'm not going to name any names, but certain politicians, they have a very high status. They have a lot of mianzi, but maybe they didn't do so many moral deeds in order to get there. There's actually a gentleman just down the road from where I live here who runs this. I love meat. I'm not vegetarian at all, but this is a vegetarian restaurant, and it's just the most incredible food ever. And it's really cheap, and it's just made with these amazing ingredients. And it's really underpriced. And I found out that it was made by a guy who had done a lot of immoral deeds in order to become very, very wealthy in China. Then he moved in like the big city in Beijing, I believe. And he moved here to Dali and opened up a vegetarian restaurant, basically at cost. It's like his way of paying back in some way to society for what he's done. Now it's just like I guess that's kind of related to mianzi and lian, isn't it? Just an interesting story that I thought I'd share. So when and how to give face and to get face, basically giving face. What does it mean and how to do it, when to know who to give face to and how much to give, right? Basically, when you give face to someone, it's essentially doing someone a favor in some way. Think of The Godfather, right? That scene in The Godfather at the beginning when everyone's coming up to him and trying to curry favor with him and asking for favors. They're getting some mianzi from him and they're giving mianzi back. Well, they will have to give mianzi back at some point, right? I thought of that. In fact, my wife was the one who gave me that example. I thought, yes, it is. It is it's taken as seriously as it is by people in that movie, in the Italian mafia in that movie. But as long as you don't actually deal with the actual mafia in China, you won't actually get hurt or anything like that. People just won't help you in the future. All right, so let's talk about more. I'm getting rambling a little bit. Let's go on to the actual points. Try and stick with this here. So how and when to give mianzi to who depends on two things really. Number one is, what can they do for you in the future? So if someone's asking you to do something for them, will they be able to repay you in some way later? That's the natural calculus. That's part of the natural equation that you do in your head. And number two, how close your relationship is with them. And that's the most important. So when you give someone mianzi, you're doing them a favor, right? You're going to have to expend your resources. Now that could be money. It could be time, energy, almost definitely energy and time. It could be you might have to ask someone else for a favor, get mianzi from someone else in order to transfer it. So someone, so it's, and that might be difficult. It might be easy. If it's easy, it's just a phone call or a text and it's not that big a deal. It's like a small favor. Then of course, you might give that to someone that you know not so well. But if it's a big favor or your mianzi that you need to get for someone else, the size of the favor you need to ask for in order to do the favor for this person is bigger than the value of this person to you, then you might not bother. You make an excuse. So I'll give you an example of this. So an example of this is like I've moved down here, I've got a baby, me and my wife, just us, no family to help us, and it can be tough, right? And we've got a couple that were introduced to us by another friend, very luckily, who have the same age baby, and they're incredibly friendly and nice and just good people, and they live right next to us, and we've just moved house, and they're just by coincidence they happen to have also moved. Like we found a house that was 2 doors down from them, so even closer now, which is just really lucky. And we look after their kid all the time, and they look after our kid all the time, and we go out together and we spend some time. It's a very common thing. It's a great situation. But if we didn't have a kid, and they asked us to babysit their child, it's like, well, I don't see you doing that for me at some point, unless you want to look after my dogs while I go on holiday or something, right? So I might make up an excuse unless they happen to be like my sister-in-law or something like that, if they're really close to me. So speaking of family, sister-in-laws and things like that, let's look into the types of relationships. How do you know how close you are? Well, there's 3 types. There's 情感性, which is basically emotional relationships, which are all about family and friends. And of course, when it comes to family, someone like your mother, it doesn't matter what they ask, you just do it, right? And friends, of course, depending on how close they are, and you get the idea. And then there's 工具性, mechanical. That's my translation. 工具 literally means tool, so using someone as a tool, essentially. So these are essentially strangers or acquaintances, people that work in the gas station, taxi drivers, just people you don't know, you don't have any close relationship whatsoever. And then there's 混合性, which is mixed. So it's a mixture of both. This is by far the most common and by far the most interesting and involves the most equations in your head when you're deciding how to deal with them. So with emotional relationships, they're based on the 需求法则, the principle of need. So someone that is your mother or your blood, or related to your blood, or your wife's brother or something like that, someone that has a very close connection to you, it doesn't really matter what they ask for in China. You just do it, There is obviously a line. There's always a line, right? But when it's someone like your mother, like I said, like it's kind of anything really. And so, I said earlier about how older people and younger and children can get away with a lot of things morally. Well, when it comes to someone that's your family, they can get away with pretty much anything, and much more than they would in the West. In fact, I've personally seen and heard like some certain things where if the average person in, say, the West, like USA, England, whatever, had this done to them by their parents, no one would question them from just cutting them off out of their life completely forever, But in China, it's kind of, that's not even on the table, It's it's your duty. It's your duty. And we'll talk about that duty idea as well. So next comes mechanical relationships. They rely on the principle of fairness, 公平法则. So you just treat them with respect and fairness. If they ask you to do a favor, a taxi driver asks you to do something for him, you're not really going to say yes to that because you don't know him at all. You have very little connection to him. So so it's just, I'm going to pay you. I'm going to be polite to you. I'm going to try not to be rude to you, and that's it. That's where our relationship ends. Next is mixed relationships. So again, the most common, and these are based on the principle of 人情法则, so favors. So first of all, as I mentioned, 人情, favors in China, in order to give 面子 to someone or ask someone for 面子, do you a favor, are transactional in nature. And just like in a lot of societies in the world, when you do someone a favor, you need to pay them back, and you are expected to. And they are also, if they ask you for a favor, Chinese people will also expect you to ask them for a favor at some point too, and they will be happy to do it. Because if they don't, then the repercussions are obvious. You don't do favors for them anymore. And we'll talk about how to refuse in a little while. So a lot of Westerners, my Western friends, even myself at one point, saw this whole situation. Again, I mentioned this already. It's very cold. It's very mechanical. So where's the love? Can't you just, you're my friend, I'll just do you a favor. What if you really think about it? First of all, there is a lot of love and care and trust that goes into these. It's not purely an equation. It's not purely mechanical. Again, unless you're dealing with just a taxi driver or whatever. And it is more complex than I'm explaining. But on the surface, it does seem like that. So one important thing, again, is how to refuse favors. So you can absolutely refuse favors. Just like I mentioned earlier with that couple, if they ask me to babysit their kid, I might do it once, but it's like, if you can't babysit my kid or do an equal favor back for me, I'm going to refuse. However, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. You can't just refuse a favor in China. If someone asks you to do something, of course you can, but you're going to hurt their 面子. You're going to essentially embarrass them and cause their status to go down, insult them essentially if you just say, no, I'm not going to do that. Of course, it's also kind of losing their 面子 for asking you something which you're unlikely to say yes to. Do you know what I mean? So, asking, hey, taxi driver, would you mind babysitting my kid? So you get the idea. But a common thing in China, and again, Westerners will just see this as lying, right? And it kind of is, but it's just the way that it's just, let's call it a white lie. When you refuse a favor, you do it carefully. And if you ask someone for a favor when they really don't want to do it for you, and there's no reason that they would do it based on the previous 2 points, they're not close to you, and or you're not likely to be able to repay them that favor, they won't just say no. They'll make up an excuse, or they'll say it in a certain way that's saying no but saying yes. Saying kind of yes, maybe, or they'll just say yes, that's no problem, and then later they'll make up an excuse and just not do it, which can be very frustrating if you don't know how this works. Okay, so just a quick phrase that is very common is to 欠 someone a 人情, to owe you a favor. So 我欠你一个人情 is a very common phrase, and is to say I owe you one, I owe you a favor. You can definitely use that if someone does something for you, just to make it clear. You don't have to, of course. It's already an unwritten rule that you will pay them back, but you can say that as well. And if you want to refuse, you have to be 委婉. You have to be 委婉. It's essentially tactful. It's a way of saying, carefully saying things not to hurt people's feelings, not to make them lose face. So you can help them 保全面子, keep their face intact, their societal and moral face intact. People are very scared in China, or well, scared may be the wrong word, but they do not want to make people lose face. 不要让人难堪. 让人难堪. If you make someone 难堪, you're essentially embarrassing them, you're making them lose face. Or 得罪 someone is to make them feel bad, ashamed, again, embarrassed. These are very dangerous because if you make someone lose face, even accidentally, not on purpose, 有恩报恩, 有仇报仇. Okay, someone will pay you back one day for that. Right? So you don't just get away with that. So you want to, that's why, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is to not cause people to lose face whenever you can. So, face and favors. I really like that alliteration. Face and favors. Essentially, 面子与人情. Face and favors. China and the West. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about the difference here. Chinese face, the biggest difference, what makes Chinese people take the idea of face so much more seriously is that it's very intensely woven into Confucianism, which is sort of what is largely Chinese modern day culture is largely based upon. So if you're not familiar with Confucianism, as I wasn't as well very recently, there's a few key concepts to just keep in mind that are very useful and applicable to real life. So there are 5 key relationships in Confucianism. One is 君臣, the idea of ruler and subjects, the relationship between ruler and subjects, father and son, 父子, 兄弟, brothers, 夫妇, husband and wife, and 朋友, friends. Now, I realize that there's not mother and son here. Of course, this is thousands of years ago, I believe. So it's very 重男轻女. It's basically, essentially, there's a heavier weight placed on males than there is in females. So, but modern day society is not 重男轻女in China, at least in the main cities. In the more rural areas, of course, it is still. But essentially, those are the 5 key relationships. So, and then there's 3 different principles, the most important principles in Confucianism. There's not only 3, but these are the 3 most important that relate as well to this concept of 面子 that we've been talking about today. So number 1 is 仁, which is essentially kindness. Now the real application and how Chinese modern day 面子 and 人情has been, let's say, influenced by this concept of 仁, kindness, is essentially grading the relationship. So who to be kind to. And how you do that is you see which of the 3 types of relationship is this person that I'm dealing with. Is it a mechanical relationship? Is it emotional, or is it mixed? And the second concept is 义, which has tons of different meanings, but the meaning I've chosen here is righteousness, doing what's right. And how that, it also is in the characters for justice, loyalty, it's in the words, for justice, loyalty, like 正义, 义气, it means loyalty, being loyal. So depending on what relationship they are, how this applies to 面子 is like, depending on what the relationship is, you decide how you're going to treat them. What's right? How should I treat this person? What's right in Chinese society? Should I treat them with the 公平法则, the idea of fairness, need, or 人情? Right? So deciding what that is the idea of 义. Deciding how, which kind of treatment this person gets depending on their relationship to you. And then thirdly, this is the most important, is li, which is etiquette. I think that's the best translation for this character in this in this context, how it relates to mianzi. So li mainly comes into the mixed relationships, how to appropriately carry out favors and these transactional 人情, these 人情交易, these favor transactions. After weighing up the options, they all must conform to etiquette of society. So essentially, the overarching principle of Confucianism is that you must try to show respect at all times. And even people that are 工具性, they're mechanical relationships to you, still treat them with etiquette, respect, make sure you don't break the fourth wall. That's how I like to describe it. You keep your face on and you play your role that you're supposed to play in that situation. So li is the most revered of all these three concepts, the most important concepts in Confucianism, perhaps, according to what I read. And it is the idea of respecting people at all times, at least showing the minimum respect, and do not cause people offense. Play the role you're supposed to play in that society at that time. And if you don't do that, it harms mianzi, your own mainly, and other people's as well. But essentially, this is the key thing to keep in mind. So this is why one of my friends came over to China, and he'd never been to China previously. And the one thing he said is that in England, he's English as well. He said that in England, the whole point when you're outside in society, don't annoy other people, don't bother other people. And in China, it's kind of the opposite. It's kind of, if you are don't react to being bothered by people. So you'll often see, Chinese people do not smile that much. They do not get angry that much in public, of course. They try and keep a relatively straight composure, and they also, if someone's like playing loud music or, just being rude or just pushing in line, for example, it's kind of, you don't call them out on it. You just sort of try and tolerate and ignore. Don't cause a fuss, because if you do, it could cause that person to lose face, and of course yourself. And when it can, like I said before, it's kind of dangerous to make Chinese people lose face in certain situations. Not like necessarily physically, like going to hurt you or something like that, but it could cause a big ruckus, because it's such a big deal over here, right? So, that's, I'd say, one of the key things to remember whilst conducting yourself in Chinese society. If you don't, then you're considered 失礼. You have lost etiquette, which means basically rude. This is the formal word for rude, which is 不礼貌. 不礼貌. 礼貌 is politeness, but this is, I guess, far more serious, to 失礼. And as I got to this point in the book, it started to get really deep, and I was really fascinated by this next point, which I had never considered before. And I kind of alluded to it a couple of times so far since I've been chatting, which is mianzi is your outside appearance. It's your face, your mianzi, your 面具, or face tool, which is mask in Chinese. It's kind of like, I consider now after reading this book, mianzi is all about the face that you put on when you go outside in China or among Chinese people. It's all about the outside. It's just a show. It's just a play. Chinese society, you could say, it was referred to in the book as a 一场戏. It's a role, and I guess all society is, right? You put on certain hats. If you go out to dinner with your parents-in-law, you might be a slightly different person than when you go out with your friends, or you go out with just your wife on a date, or you just go out and talk to a bank teller in a bank. You act differently depending on where you are, and you have to conform to that. And if you don't, there are consequences to that. So the idea of mianzi is it's like the mask, and you play the role that society demands of you. And there was this other book that was referred to in this book. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll put it up on screen here. But it was written by a foreigner who'd spent a long time in China. It was about assessing what Chinese people are like, introducing them to Western society, essentially. And one of the things he said is that Chinese people love watching opera and shows like state theatre so much that they made their society into a theatre. And I just really like that reference. Another key thing is that if you look at 面子, that's the outside. You look at, but it's different from 里子. And this was a new word for me. I hadn't heard this word before reading this book, which means literally lining, or the substance, the real you. So the real you is your 里子, and your 面子 is the society, the you that society demands of you in various, infinite different situations. So when you don't conform to how society demands of you in all these different situations, there's a word you can use, which I'm sure if you've been learning Chinese for a little while, you've probably heard, which is 对不起. 对不起. I refer to this in our pronunciation mastery course. And it literally, if you break down the character, to 对 someone means to face them. And 不起 is a compliment that basically says cannot do the previous, whatever the previous character is. I can't achieve that. So we say 对不起, it means I can't face you right now. I can't face you because I have lost face. I have not acted the way I should have acted, and I'm sorry. And that's another key thing as well. I'm sorry, 对不起, is about the other person in Chinese. I'm sorry in English is about me. Again, individualist, collectivist. And I thought about this, and I thought of a recent thing that happened again. I took my dogs out. I just got a car, and it's so much better now. I finally got a car after all these years of just using public transport. And I didn't have, before I got a car when I first moved here to Dali, a friend of ours, the couple that I mentioned, the father, he took us out in his car and he said, bring your dogs along with you. And we went to this nice place just down the road. It wasn't just down, it was about a 45-minute drive actually. And we took up the dogs, and as soon as we got out of the car, one of my dogs, who never does this, just decided to roll in poop, like immediately. As soon as we got out of the car, we got 2 kids with us as well. It's boiling hot, just drove 45 minutes. Dog rolls in poop right next to the lake, and there's these really strict, sorry, I won't go there yet. Basically, I went and I was really upset with the dog, obviously. Took him next to the lake, which is where we were. I started washing him. People were taking pictures of me and stuff. I was like, why are people taking pictures of me? Maybe it's because I had my top off, right? And people were like, oh, foreigner with his top off, washing a dog, let's take a picture. I was like, oh, whatever. So, and then we carried on with our walk. We went, 10 minutes later, we went and sat down somewhere. I'm still like annoyed, right? I'm still not in a good mood right now. And then people start coming up to us, people that work at the lake area, and they're saying, you're going to get fined because you washed your dog in the lake. And there's these really strict restrictions on, just like strict to the point of illogical, for doing anything in the water. There's a guy who washed his feet in the water. He got like a $300 fine or something like that. Anyway, they were like taking more pictures of me and saying, we got your picture, we're going to send you a fine. And I was like, I was about to like lose my temper. And, I was basically I had to just go off by myself and just have a word with myself and just like calm down. And I went back. And I wasn't very rude, but I did kind of like argue with the woman. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. The poo was next to the lake. What are you talking about? Like, I wasn't using I didn't bring my dogs with shampoo to actually wash them in the lake. Do you know what I mean? And she was just kept repeating the same phrase from the party over and over again. And anyway, so I immediately, after I calmed down, I turned to my friend and I said, 对不起. Because I should not have acted that way. I should have I broke the fourth wall. I did not act how that situation demanded me to act in Chinese society, which was, sorry, 不好意思. I'm sorry, I won't do that again. and then move on and just not express anger, just try and stay calm. That's what the society demanded of me at that point, and I did not fulfill that. So I said, 对不起. That's most of the points that I wanted to talk about regarding this book and this concept of 面子, 人情与面子, and I hope that helped. There's a few things that I just completely didn't know that I learned from the book, but there was most of the stuff that living in China for 8 years that I had known subconsciously, but just to see it explained in that way, and also with the reference to Confucianism, it just really helped me to further understand and, more importantly, accept this idea of 面子. Because Western people, I'll say again, we can often, on the surface, it doesn't sit well with a lot of Westerners, this idea, this transactional nature of it. But and that's something that I wanted to just quickly finish on, which is there is a lot of love in this. Again, I'll mention that couple. When we first met, it was fairly transactional. It was fairly 工具性. That we were mixed relationship, but we were more mechanical than we were emotional, right? But now I've spent so much time with those people. I've looked after their lovely daughter. I love their daughter. Literally, I would protect her as if she was a family member now. And yes, and I don't care really if and at this point, they just they knock the door and we answer, and he's like, okay, I'm heading out for an hour. Just keep an eye on her, yeah? And he's gone before I even have the chance to say yes, right? And that's fine, because I know that A, he'll do the same for me, but B, remember that second point, we're close now. I actually care about this man and his wife and the daughter, and they care about my son. So it's it is human. It's very human. It can be very warm and loving and friendly, and I just wanted everyone to know that. So I hope that helped. Check out the book 人情与面子, and check out my shadowing video where I break down how to use the app where I found this book, or rather the 25-minute breakdown of it. Just search for shadowing on our YouTube channel, and I'll also put the link below when we put this clip on YouTube. So if you have any thoughts or comments about this, let us know below, or just send an email to contact@mandarinblueprint.com. If there's anything else that you want us to talk about, delve into a little bit, I'd love to do that too. Just let us know. So let's move on to the comments and emails that we've had this week. The first one is from Ceri Woods, level 15, complete. Really good progress, by the way. Well done. You're really starting to get into it now. Getting to the point where you can actually read sentences. Things are starting to come together around this level. So well done. This level has been really fun. There you go. I often watch C-dramas, and I noticed even in just a week that I understand far more words and phrases than I had the week before. It's really encouraging. Yes, your snowball is building up momentum now. Okay, so do not lose that momentum, or try your best to keep it up. Never have a 0 day, and you'll see that you'll feel those breakthroughs come through much more and more often. So well done there, Ceri. Next is Chidimma on Mandarin Syllables. That's the pronunciation mastery course. And Chidimma says, 2 lessons down and I'm already loving it. So thanks for that. Really appreciate all that. Any positive feedback is great. So I wonder where you are now. Keep us updated. Send us, again, keep the emails coming, keep the comments coming. We love to hear them and read them. And if you have questions, of course, get in touch anytime. Next is John Nomura, Vocab Unlocked for T, which means to kick. And one of the couple of words that were unlocked were 踢球, football, and 打球. And John asks, is 踢球 football and 打球 soccer? No. So 踢球 is could be football. It could also just be kicking a ball. 我们踢球吧. Let's just kick a ball around, It's not an actual game of football. Do you know what I mean? But 打球 is any just ball game, really, usually with hands and arms. 打球. So tennis, for example. So yeah, basically ball games. And yeah, and I see. Yeah, football and soccer. So as in football, as in American football, right? And soccer. I think 踢球 is mainly about soccer, what I call football. American football is 橄榄球, I believe. It's been ages since I've seen that word, so I think it's olive, right? 橄榄, right? But I haven't seen the characters in so long. But yeah, probably shouldn't say that, should I? I should probably edit that out. So next is Rick Angleland on 收到, to receive, and he says, regarding the sentence that we provide, 你收到我送你的勺子没? So this may at the end. Have you received the spoon I sent you? He asked, is this a colloquial way of saying 你收到没收到我送你的勺子? Or a bit shorter, 你收没收到我送你的勺子? Yeah, you would definitely say the second example there. You wouldn't really say the first one. 收到没收到. It's 收没收到. That's fine. But you don't say 收到没收到. You don't say the full compound word both times. Or you could, of course, you don't have to use may. You can just say ma. So may is actually really cool. It's like a colloquial way of using ma. Okay, and you can use it at the end of sentences just like you would with ma, but it sounds just much more native. It sounds much more like a Chinese person speaks. But both are absolutely fine. If you say ma, it doesn't mean that you say ma at the end as a question, as a yes/no question, that you'll sound non-native. You get the idea. It's just a bit more, this guy knows his stuff, you know. So you check that one out. You can try that out. Christine on Vocab Unlocked for 丑 asks, what's the function of 却 in 但我却觉得他很丑? Does the sentence mean the same without it? 却 is a rather advanced character word that adds a little flavor of something to the sentence. When something that you're saying in the sentence goes against the expectations of either yourself or the listener based on the context that you're looking at. So I can read that sentence. I have no idea what was said before, but because it has 却, right? So let's translate the sentence first. It says, but I think it is ugly. But I think it's ugly. Because it has 但我觉得它很丑. So without the 却, but I think it's ugly, right? That's what it would be, and it's absolutely grammatically fine to do that. But if you add the 却 in, then that means to me that I know that either the speaker or the person speaking, the expectation is that he doesn't, or he or she doesn't think it's ugly. So you say 却, and you can also say 到 as well. 到 with a 人字旁. Not 到 as in arrive. It's like the same character for arrive, but with a person component on the left. It has a similar function. 但我却觉得它很丑. So that 却 is basically saying, you thought I was going to think it was good looking, it was pretty, it was nice looking, but actually I think it's ugly. And it just implies that. It's very cool. It's rather high level. It took me a while to get that one, actually. So good question, Christine. Next is Yann Massard 小心, which means to be careful in context. This is where we give you example sentences. And Yann says, asks, is using 有 as in to have for there is as in 有车过来了, as in there's a car coming. A car is coming. Is that a common thing? If so, I find it super interesting that in French they express it in the same way. They use il y a, literally there it has, or just it has, meaning there is too. And yeah, it's actually, I remember that from when I saw this comment. I was like, yeah, I remember that from school. I learned 4 years of French. Can't speak French. But I do remember that il y a, yeah, and it's the same thing in Chinese for sure. There is. That's how we say. And we don't just say a car's coming. We say there is a car coming. 有, or have a car coming. Very interesting comparison. I love seeing those comparisons between Chinese and other languages, especially ones that I'm not aware of. So thanks for that, Yann. So those are all the just general emails and comments for this week. Let's jump into the vocab living links. So first is for Roland Kofler, Vocab Unlocked for 来. So there's 4 words that get unlocked at this point, compound words. 来自, 上来, 下来, and 过来. So Roland says, for come over to my house, I use a picture of Hansel and Gretel and the witch in front of the gingerbread. Iconic and dramatic. That's very, very memorable indeed. Yes. 过来. Yeah. And you could do the same thing for 下来. You know, you could think, I like to get, there must be a movie. Oh, there's like that movie, which I don't know the name of, with an actor that I don't know the name of, but if I say what happens in the scene, you'll know what you'll be able to know, right? You'll be able to find that. If for some reason it's just so, I haven't actually seen this film, but I know this scene. It's with a very famous actor holding up a boombox outside a girl's house, and he's saying 下来. I don't know if she's up actually. I think she might be on the second floor. If she is, that'll work, right? But I would find that picture. Again, never seen the movie, but it would still work. And 上来, I would maybe use Rapunzel as a reference. 上来, because 上来is I'm above and I'm saying come up, right? 上来, and then 来自. 来自 is a bit more complicated, isn't it? Because 来自 means to come from, and the two characters are come, and 自 also means from, but the most common thing that people relate to 自 is self. So it literally means come and come. But you could say, but with the final one here, 来自, 来means come, and 自 in this context also means come or from. So literally it's come from. Yeah. Or you could do 自 is also 自己, like self. So it's so literal that I would just maybe just choose a picture, or maybe relate to the sound instead. 来自, it kind of sounds like 老子, like the famous Chinese philosopher. So I'd say maybe he comes from China and have a picture of Lao Tzu. Of course, the tones are different, and the pronunciation is Lao and Lai. It's different, but I think that would work for me. Or just search for 来自, or a picture of the UN, all those UN flags. I'd find something else like that, and then maybe move on and strengthen that card if I was having trouble with it, trouble recalling information later. Next one is from Robert Toms, Vocab Unlocked for 某. 某个, a certain something, and 某些, some. So he says, I used one picture of Prince Herbert from Monty Python for 某个, and 3 of the same picture for 某些. That's a really interesting one. Yeah, I really like that one. Well done, Robert. Next is Matt Shubert on Vocab Unlocked for 宝宝. This is the most adorable word. Little treasure, baby. Yeah, 宝宝. Treasure. I mean, that one kind of writes itself. It's like your baby is the most treasured thing. But you could maybe find a picture of a baby with some bling bling on. That just came to my mind. But I think just listening to Matt's breakdown there would be enough. Jeremy Marie on Vocab Unlocked for 正在, so 在. He says GPS tracking. It's accurate. It always is a happening, and it knows your location. That's fantastic. I really like that connection. 正在, it's accurate as long as you have signal, right? And it's happening. 正在is it's happening always. It's constantly updated, like every second or other second, right? And 在, yeah, that just ticks all the boxes. I have nothing to add to that. That's like almost, I'd say, as close to perfect as you can get. Another one from Roland on 桌, as in 桌子. He says the typical Chinese restaurant tables are round and have a turntable on them. Yes, they do. Yeah, so you can pass the dishes, because there's just tons of dishes on the table. You can pass the dishes around. So just picking a very well-known, very iconic table, a specific table, will work, especially for a character that's a compound word that's designed like this, so simply. There's not really much else you can connect to except the sound, 桌子. So thanks for that, Roland. So let's move on to the movies now. We've got a few movies here. First one is it's from Rick Santos on Make a Movie for Me. And he says the MI actress has finished her meals in the kitchen, second tone, of the Null set. She's about to watch a football game. She sees a grain of rice, must be a big grain of rice, right? On the road, so it's just a piece of road, that's your prop for that, and asks the rice, are you lost? 迷路了吗? 迷路了. literally to lose road. 迷路了吗? You should not be either in the rice field or be on the table to be served as food. Bewildered and confused, me, that's the definition, one of the key words. The rice said, I don't know, I think I was blown over by the winnowing fan. I don't know what winnowing fan is, but I know what fan is. I think I am bewitched, 被迷住了, but I don't want to go back to the kitchen to be cooked either. The me actress said, luckily for you, I am not a witch, and I'm finished eating. But now the old rice field has been recently converted to a football field, 足球场. The rice charmingly begged her, oh, that's great, please bring me to the football field instead. I will be a big fan. 球迷. That's great. The reason why I like that a lot, obviously, if this was just, Rick has made the scene unnecessarily long with lots of unnecessary details, which would be unnecessary if he weren't trying to reference actual compound words with this actual character in them, which I think is a fantastic idea, and it's really creative and helpful for people reading it. Of course, if he wasn't doing that, if he was just adding details, I would say, hey, don't waste time adding these details. But he's referring to them to make the story not only more interesting, but also to sort of give you a taste of some of the compound words that you're going to be unlocking with this character. So thanks a lot for that, Rick. Next is John. In the kitchen of my A set, Zach Hansen is drinking green leaf tea, that's the bottom prop, and trying out miscellaneous baseball bats with holes in them. His friends are laughing at him, and he thinks he has a hole in his head to use these bats. I really like that idea, and obviously you'll see that they're obviously different sizes, shapes, colors, materials there, and I think that's more than enough to go on. I'm not quite sure what the holes are about. I don't quite get that reference, but I think everything else there is really well done. And the last scene for today is from Stephanie. I'll make a movie for home. She says, Harold is in the kitchen of my ONG flat trying to stage a film. Unfortunately, an I-beam is running down the center wall. He brings out a bundle of silk scarves to drape and decorate, ready to film. Simple, great, using everything you need, making everything red. What else do you need? It's a great scene. Keep it simple is my favorite concept, and I'm glad you're sticking with that, Stephanie. So that is the final comment for this week. I hope you enjoyed again my my rather long explanation of Mianza. I hope it made sense. Please give us your feedback. Always interested. And again, always get in touch at contact@mandarinblueprint.com if you have questions. And if you listened this far and you haven't tried out our course yet, we now have a 30-day free trial with full access to 400 video lessons. So you should probably check that out if you haven't already. So thanks very much. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.